There is a place hidden deep within the jagged, freezing arteries of the high Himalayas, where high-altitude survival demands crossing a bridge that should have collapsed years ago. It is not a structure forged by the natural world. It is a fractured, decaying ribbon of hemp and wood constructed by man and then wisely abandoned to the elements. For decades, the relentless storms of this alpine ecosystem have battered its cables, rotting the planks, fraying the ropes, until all that remains is a deadly, swaying pendulum suspended over an endless abyss. And today, hidden in the blinding white of the alpine snow, the ultimate apex predator is counting on a single misstep. This is the hanging valley of the Karakoram, a theater of brutal natural selection, a vertical landscape split by a 30-meter deep chasm separating two entirely different worlds. For the Markhor mountain goat, crossing this bridge is not a shortcut. It is the absolute difference between surviving the shifting season and starving alongside it. As the bleak afternoon light filters through the heavy, overcast sky, a small herd arrives at the precipice. The lead alpha, a massive male bearing the iconic, heavy spiral horns of his lineage, steps cautiously up to the anchor point. His split hooves are nature's ultimate climbing gear. A hard, sharp outer keratin edge designed to dig into microscopic crevices, paired with a soft, rubbery inner pad that grips like a biological anchor on wet, treacherous stone. But a biological anchor offers little comfort when the road beneath you is a single, waterlogged, rotting wooden plank. Watch closely as the herd begins their terrifying march. Each step is a calculated test of faith. The alpha presses down agonizingly slowly, reading the decaying wood with his immense weight, trusting hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary adaptation over the inevitable collapse. By late afternoon, the temperature plummets. The fierce alpine wind rises and the abandoned bridge begins to sing. The ancient ropes groan under the agonizing tension. The splintered planks flex and warp, and the entire massive structure begins swaying in slow, sickening arcs over the foggy void below. This is the moment the herd dreads most. They are exposed, vulnerable, caught exactly in the dead center of the chasm, with 30 meters of open air yawning beneath their trembling hooves. A young Markhor, exhausted and overwhelmed by the sheer vertigo of the crossing, hesitates just a fraction too long. Its front hooves tremble on the edge of a wet plank. The wood whines under the localized pressure. Behind the terrified juvenile, the rest of the herd has ground to a halt. There is no retreat on a platform barely 3 feet wide. There is nowhere to go but forward. The young goat takes its first trembling step, and the rotting plank beneath it groans like a wounded animal in the freezing air. If you have ever watched a mountain goat scale a sheer vertical cliff face and wondered how it survives the impossible, you are not alone. The snow leopard has spent its entire life asking the exact same question. Known as the ghost of the mountain, this solitary hunter is a perfect evolutionary adaptation to the lethal geometry of the Karakoram. But in the open, a chase against a Markhor is a gamble of incredible caloric expenditure. The leopard does not want a chase, it wants a trap. And this decaying bridge is the ultimate bottleneck.
Twilight descends upon the Himalayas. The temperature crashes below freezing, casting the sheer rock faces in deep, crushing shadows of blue and gray. The snow leopard has been watching, completely motionless, for over 6 hours. A master of patience, its thick fur rendering it totally invisible against the frost-covered stone. It watches the young goat stumble. It watches the herd bunch together in a panicked bottleneck. It waits for the absolute edge of hesitation. It picks its moment when the last Markhor is trapped mid-bridge, completely engulfed by the pendulum sway of the wind, too far from either side of the cliff to turn back. With a terrifying roar of splintering wood, the predator abandons its stealth. It launches from the ledge. The entire bridge erupts violently under the sudden weight. Ropes scream. Dust and splinters explode into the twilight air. Absolute panic overtakes the herd. The goats sprint blindly forward, their hooves slipping and sliding chaotically on the wet, tearing wood. The leopard effortlessly closes the gap, its massive paws absorbing the shock of the swaying bridge, its eyes locked fiercely onto the struggling juvenile back of the line. The heavy hemp ropes whip wildly in the gale. The fragile planks shatter under the impact, plummeting silently into the dense fog below. 30 meters of deadly open air yawns beneath both predator and prey. The leopard lunges, jaws open, razor-sharp claws extending to pull the young goat down into the abyss. But the Alpha Markhor does the only thing that can possibly save its bloodline. It stops dead. It violently slams its hooves into the disintegrating wood, hauling its massive body around to face the threat. It lowers its heavy, lethal spiral horns, creating an impenetrable wall of keratin and bone. On a decaying bridge, barely wide enough for one creature to stand, the apex predator suddenly has nowhere to dodge.
Momentum carries the leopard forward into the deadly barricade. Desperate to avoid being impaled, the cat aggressively hits the brakes, violently twisting its muscular body to the side. But there is no solid ground to catch it. The leopard's back legs slip entirely off the edge of the narrow plank. The ghost of the mountain drops. With a frantic, the leopard digs its front claws deep into the rotting wood. It fights the immense, crushing pull of gravity, tearing deep, agonizing grooves into the wet timber. For one frozen, terrifying second in the fading light, the undisputed king of the mountain hangs suspended over the abyssal void by a single straining paw. The wood, under the immense concentrated weight, slowly, agonizingly, the wood begins to give way. Realizing the structure is failing, the leopard makes a desperate, calculated choice. It releases its grip. It scrambles backward, hauling itself up just enough to vault away from the lethal horns, twisting its body to land precariously on the solid rock anchor of the starting cliff face. The predator retreats silently into the darkening, frozen valley, a deep, burning hunger echoing in its chest. It has lost the gamble. Across the chasm, the surviving Markhor herd reaches the far ridge. They step off the final splintering plank and collapse onto the freezing, solid stone,
their bodies trembling violently in the night air, exhausted but whole. They have survived the gauntlet. On this decaying bridge, and in every frozen valley like it across the roof of the world, the calculus of high-altitude survival is brutally simple. There is no room for error. One wrong step on wet wood, one unexpected gust of alpine wind, one single moment of hesitation, and gravity will ruthlessly collect another debt. The mountain does not care about the predator's hunger, nor does it care about the prey's will to live. The mountain does not take sides. It only enforces the ruthless laws of natural selection. As the pitch-black night completely swallows the hanging valley, leaving only the hollow of the wind in its wake, the brutal reality of this alpine ecosystem remains unchanged. If you want to see what happens when the starving ghost of the mountain is forced to hunt in the treacherous, frozen valleys below, watch what happens next.